You guys know what it's like to get stuck in a reading slump, so if you're looking for some sci-fi to get those pages turning, I have 5 recommendations for you. And each of those 5 books are under 500 pages. If you're looking to burn through some books, I'm not going to recommend you a 1,300 page prequel from the 17-book series, The Empire of Grindeldondle. Short books only. And secondly, all of these are page turners. Now that doesn't necessarily just mean a fast-paced plot. It could also mean there's a particular concept or character that pulls you through the book. So, my first recommendation is Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. One night, Jason gets abducted, and when he wakes up, the world appears to be the same, but things aren't quite right. His wife isn't his wife, his son was never born, and instead of a college professor, he's a celebrated physicist. What's real? What's not real? How did everything change? And can he change it back? Dark Matter opens with an intriguing premise, and every chapter feels like another twist and turn in this waterslide of a sci-fi book that just gets faster and faster as it sucks you into its sci-fi mysteries. I would recommend this film to fans of Christopher Nolan, as it reminded me a little bit of Inception and Memento. The pacing is fantastic, and each chapter feels like a scene in a film. This book includes some scientific ideas, including quantum mechanics, but they're written in both a concise and accessible way. I think that both experienced readers and readers that are newer to the genre will enjoy the concepts in Dark Matter. Crouch sometimes uses this staccato formatting with paragraph breaks, and not everybody enjoyed that, but I quite liked it, as I found that it helped build the tension. The book's strengths are the plot and the concepts, but I also thought the characters were well written enough that I was able to still care about them. And the themes revolving around time and choices was something that I personally connected to. I think there's a lot to enjoy in Dark Matter. Up next, we have Cat's Cradle by Kurt Vonnegut. Dr. Felix Honecker has left a deadly legacy to the world. Ice-9, a lethal chemical capable of freezing the entire planet. The search for its whereabouts leads to Honecker's 3 eccentric children, to a crazed dictator in the Caribbean, and to madness. A lot of science fiction is rather serious. A planet is always at risk of destruction or being sucked into a black hole. Cat's Cradle does deal with rather heavy themes, including war and religion and technology, but it deals with them in a profoundly funny way. Vonnegut has a dark and satirical sense of humor, and I think he has a real knack for poking fun at life's biggest mysteries, as well as its smallest oddities. No wonder kids grow up crazy. A Cat's Cradle is nothing but a bunch of X's between somebody's hands, and little kids look and look and look at all those X's, and no damn cat and no damn cradle. Cat's Cradle is less about the plot and the individual characters, so much as it is about the themes and society as a whole. It's not necessarily an overly optimistic book, but Vonnegut has a special gift for connecting with his readers, and letting you know that he thinks about what you think about, and he cares about what you care about, and that can make a seemingly nonsensical world just that little bit better. If you're looking for some comedy in your science fiction, there are a few authors with a sharper wit than Vonnegut. Moving on to my third recommendation, we have Sea of Rust by C. Robert Cargill. Humankind is extinct. Now the world is controlled by one-world intelligences that have assimilated the minds of millions of robots. But not all robots are willing to cede their individuality, and Brittle is one of the holdouts. Brittle has to evade capture long enough to find rare parts to make repairs, but as their CPU deteriorates, all their old memories resurface. In my experience, post-apocalyptic books tend to be a little bit slow, but Sea of Rust is a fun adventure, packed full of action, sci-fi concepts, and robots. Sea of Rust has a wonderful cinematic quality to it, and I talked a little bit about this in my sci-fi adaptations that I'd like to see, but I think a Mad Max-style movie with robots would be absolutely awesome to see. Sea of Rust follows 2 different timelines, and when books do this, I tend to favor one and find that the other starts to slow the story down a little. But in Sea of Rust, I found both timelines to be equally interesting, and they served each other in a way that gave the book a great momentum. This book has some pretty cool ideas to do with artificial intelligence and consciousness. I actually wish that the book had pushed those ideas a little bit harder and gone a little bit further with those concepts. But with some interesting ideas, fun action, and witty dialogue, it's hard not to blow your way through Sea of Rust. And It's worth picking up just for this cover alone. For my fourth recommendation, I've gone with a little bit of a left field pick, and that is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I try to read a range of sci-fi books, whether that's hard or soft sci-fi, or classic or modern. But when it comes to classic sci-fi books that get talked about a lot, they're rarely from much earlier than the 1930s or 40s. So I wanted to recommend to you something from the 1800s. I definitely could have gone with something from H.G. Wells or Jules Verne, but my personal favorite from that time period is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I finally picked this up relatively recently, and it did take me about 30 or 40 pages to get into the writing style. But once I did, that older writing style actually started to feel fresh. It was a nice break from what I read most of the time, and it was something that motivated me in order to read more. And that decision really paid off, because this is an incredibly impactful book. I think that Frankenstein's monster is one of the great characters in the entire genre of science fiction. And it's so strange to me that in pop culture, he's displayed as a lumbering, groaning oaf. But in reality, he's a deeply intellectual, emotional, and philosophical creature, which makes the fact that he's shunned from society and feels this perpetual feeling of loneliness all the more devastating. Shelley masterfully explores a range of themes in this book, including hubris, failure, grief, regret, and revenge. Every action in this book has a consequence that leaves a mark, and it greatly impacted the way I view things like identity and self-worth. This isn't the most plot-driven book, and the writing style might take you a little while to get into, but once you do, I think that the ideas will pull you all the way through the book. And just quickly, before we get to our fifth and final book, if you want to chat with other sci-fi fans, join us on Discord. And if you want to get to vote on what I read, consider becoming a Patreon member, where you can become one of my robots, androids, or cyborgs like Nima and a New Eden. And for my fifth and final pick, I went with Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. Ryland Grace wakes up with memory loss. He can't even remember his own name. He appears to be on a space mission, but something went wrong. As Grace familiarizes himself with his surroundings, he starts to piece together how he got there and what's at stake. Project Hail Mary is a crowd pleaser. I'd recommend you pick it up whether it's your first sci-fi book or your 1000th sci-fi book. And that's because it's packed with science, written in a fast-paced and accessible way. I love the MacGyver in space premise, where Ryland has to use his knowledge of maths and science in order to survive. It is a little bit similar to Andy Weir's first book, The Martian, but I think they're different enough that you can enjoy both. The Martian is also a great pick for this list. I did actually slightly prefer the setting in The Martian, but I decided to go with Project Hail Mary because I enjoyed the characters and the scope just that little bit more. Project Hail Mary has pretty much everything one could want in a page-turning sci-fi book. It has big ideas, funny dialogue, high stakes, and charming characters. I'll be honest, I did tear up at the end of this one. So those are my 5 recommendations. Let me know what you think of each of these, and let me know what sci-fi books help get you out of a reading slump. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, subscribe. It's free, and you can find more sci-fi content over here.